A garden reclaimed. I woke up to a nightmare. My once beautiful garden, where I'd poured endless hours planting, watering, and tending to every detail, had become a disaster zone. The vibrant flowers I'd nurtured were uprooted, the rich soil washed away, and cutting through the heart of it all was a deep, jagged trench. It looked like someone had taken a massive shovel and torn my yard apart. My chest tightened as I stepped closer, trying to process the wreckage. Then I saw it. Small markers stamped with the HOA's logo pressed into the freshly disturbed ground. My jaw clenched. They'd done this without warning, without permission. I stormed over to the HOA president's house, my pulse racing, ready to demand answers. When I got there, Lisa Bennett stood in her doorway, arms crossed, a smug grin on her face. "It's for drainage," she said coolly. "Nothing personal." Nothing personal? They'd gutted my property. If they wanted to play dirty, fine, I'd show them how water diversion really worked. And this time, it wouldn't be my yard that paid the price. Hey, welcome to my story. Drop a comment and let me know where you're reading from. I've always taken pride in my home, especially my garden. It wasn't just a pastime, it was my sanctuary. Every bloom, every blade of grass was the result of my sweat and care. But the HOA? They never approved. They had rules for everything: house colors, lawn mowing schedules, even hedge heights. I'd dealt with their nitpicking for years, but I never imagined they'd go this far. That morning when I stepped outside and saw my garden in ruins, a gaping trench slashing through it like a wound, I felt my blood boil. Who could have done this? Then I spotted the HOA signs, and it clicked. I marched straight to Lisa, the HOA president, ready for a fight. She smirked at me, arms still crossed. "It's for the community's benefit," she said, as if that excused everything. My fist tightened. They thought they could trash my property and walk away unscathed? They were dead wrong. Lisa's smug face lingered in my mind all day, stoking my anger. They'd ripped up my yard without so much as a heads up, and now I was supposed to just roll over? That trench wasn't just an eyesore, it was a slap in the face. But I wouldn't lose my cool. If I was going to hit back, I had to be calculated. I spent the rest of the day hunched over my laptop, digging into water flow, drainage systems, and soil erosion. It didn't take long to piece it together. The HOA had carved that trench to redirect rainwater away from their precious streets and homes, funneling it right through my property. My yard had become their dumping ground. But what if the water didn't flow through my land? What if it went back where it started? The solution was simpler than I'd expected. A few tweaks to the trench's path, subtle shifts at key points would send the water away from my yard and straight toward the HOA's turf. I wouldn't block it outright. That'd be illegal. But I didn't need to. A little redirection, and gravity would do the rest, sending water into their streets, their driveways, maybe even their houses. I grinned to myself. Let's see Lisa smirk through that. That night, I set my plan in motion. I waited until after midnight, when the neighborhood was quiet and dark. Armed with a shovel, gloves, and a headlamp, I stepped into my wrecked garden. The trench was deep, but not so deep I couldn't reshape it. I worked fast, but carefully, adjusting the slope just enough to alter the water's course. It wasn't drastic, nothing that'd stand out at a glance, but it was enough to shift the flow. I packed the soil tight where I needed it to hold and loosened it where I wanted the water to carve deeper. The trick was making it look natural, like the rain itself had shifted things. Every sound made me see a car in the distance, a dog barking down the street, leaves rustling in the breeze. I wasn't technically breaking any laws, but if someone caught me, they'd ask questions. I sped up. After nearly 2 hours, I stepped back and checked my work. It was flawless. The trench still looked like a standard drainage ditch, but now it'd steer water right back to the HOA's pristine little world. I wiped the sweat off my brow, smoothed out my footprints, and slipped back inside. Now I just had to wait. The forecast had been calling for a big storm, and the sky had been darkening all day. By the next evening, thunder growled on the horizon. I stood on my porch, watching the first raindrops hit the ground. The wind kicked up, shaking the trees, and the air smelled sharp and wet. This was it. As the rain grew heavier, turning into a full-on downpour, water started rushing into the trench. My heart thudded as I grabbed a flashlight and peeked over the edge. It was working perfectly. The water followed the new path I'd set, veering away from my yard and heading straight for the HOA streets. I smirked, stepped back inside, and brewed a cup of coffee. Tomorrow was going to be a show. An hour later, the storm hit its peak. Lightning split the sky, lighting up sheets of rain, pounding the rooftops. The wind howled, rattling my windows. I could hear the roar of rushing water. Then came the yelling. I threw on a raincoat and stepped outside, playing the part of a worried neighbor. What I saw almost made me laugh out loud. The HOA's perfect little enclave was a mess. Water surged down their streets, pooling in driveways. Lawns were turning into muddy bogs. A few unlucky homeowners had water lapping at their porches. The trench, meant to shield them, had backfired spectacularly. Lisa was out there, soaked to the bone, shouting orders at HOA members, but it was pointless. The water was relentless, and the storm wasn't slowing down. I kept my expression neutral, blending in with the stunned neighbors, but inside, I was cheering. They'd trashed my garden. Now their whole community was underwater, and they had no clue I'd pulled the strings. The rain hammered down, soaking everything. Thunder shook the sky, vibrating through my chest. I stood at the edge of my porch, watching the trench fill up. At first, it played out like the HOA expected water raced down the ditch, heading where they thought it'd drain. But then my tweaks kicked in. It was subtle at first, almost invisible. The water hesitated where I'd adjusted the slope, tiny streams breaking off and pushing toward the HOA side of the street instead of mine. I held my breath. Then it happened. A surge of water broke through the loosened soil, and the trench fully redirected. The flood swung toward the HOA's territory. It started small, just extra water pooling near their sidewalks, nothing alarming. But within minutes, the pools turned into streams. Gutters overflowed. The main road gleamed as water spread fast. Then, like a dam bursting, the real flood hit. Water poured into driveways, swallowing Lisa's manicured hedges. Trash cans floated down the street. Lawns became swamps. A car alarm wailed as water climbed halfway up a sedan's tires. Porch lights flickered in the deluge, revealing panicked homeowners stepping out, dazed and horrified by the chaos unfolding before them. I spotted Lisa on her porch, clutching her phone, frozen. She was drenched, her usual swagger gone, replaced by pure shock. Then, as if it finally clicked, she sprang into action. She bolted into the storm, waving at her HOA crew. "We need to stop this." The drains checked the drains. A few guys waded into knee-deep water, fumbling to clear the storm drains, but it was too late. The drains were swamped, the water too fast, too fierce. A man in a flapping raincoat yelled, "Where's this water coming from?" Lisa whirled toward the trench, her eyes widening as she traced the flow back to her own streets. For the first time, I saw fear on her face. "This isn't right," she muttered, her voice nearly lost in the wind. The trench was supposed to protect us. I smiled to myself. Oh, it was supposed to, Lisa. But you forgot one thing: it wasn't supposed to ruin my garden either. The storm raged on. Lightning flashed, spotlighting the destruction in real time. A tree branch snapped and crashed across the road, blocking a flooded exit. More car alarms blared as water seeped into garages. Homeowners darted out with buckets, frantically scooping water from their doorways. A few had sandbags, but it was futile. The water kept rising. Somewhere in the chaos, a voice shouted, "Call the city. We need emergency services." Lisa's phone trembled in her hands, but even she knew help wouldn't arrive fast enough. This was a nightmare, and it was only getting worse. I stood quietly at the edge of my property, rain soaking through my clothes, watching it all go down. I didn't care about the cold. For the first time in years, the HOA wasn't calling the shots. They'd built that trench without my say-so, thinking they could use my land as their fix. Now the water had come home, and they were powerless to stop it. By morning, the storm had blown over, but the damage was done. I stepped outside, pretending to survey the aftermath like any other concerned resident. The HOA's neighborhood looked like a war zone. Lawns were trashed, driveways buried under thick mud, waterlogged furniture strewn across the streets. Lisa's precious domain, her little empire, was in shambles. I saw homeowners staring at their flooded garages, shaking their heads. A few unlucky ones had basements full of water. Soggy files floated in murky puddles outside their once spotless HOA office. Lisa stood in the middle of it all, drenched, exhausted, and angrier than I'd ever seen her. She barked orders at HOA members, demanding someone figure out what went wrong, but no one had answers. By noon, a crowd of HOA folks had gathered at the clubhouse, their faces twisted with frustration. They wanted explanations. "This was supposed to be prevented," a man yelled. "The trench was built to keep water out, not flood us." A woman crossed her arms. "Maybe it failed, or maybe someone messed with it. That was my opening. I stepped forward, keeping my tone even. Funny you mentioned that, I said, loud enough for everyone here, because I did fix the trench after you all dug it through my yard without asking. The crowd went silent. Eyes turned to me. Lisa's face drained of color. You what? She hissed. I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos before and after shots of my yard, the trench tearing through my garden, the chaos they'd left behind. You wrecked my property without notice, I said, my voice steady. You turned my yard into your drainage dump. So yeah, I made some adjustments to keep the water from ruining my home. Murmurs rippled through the group. A few homeowners shot Lisa suspicious looks. You never told us the trench went through his yard, someone muttered. Lisa's face contorted with rage. He's lying. He redirected the flood. I smirked. If you're saying the trench caused the flood, then you're admitting it was faulty to begin with. Which means the HOA's on the hook for all this damage. Lisa opened her mouth, then snapped it shut. She walked right into it. If she blamed me, she'd have to admit the trench was the problem, and if it was the problem, the HOA was liable. The meeting spiraled out of her control. You used our dues to build this thing, and now our homes are trashed, a man shouted. Who signed off on this? A woman demanded. Why weren't we told? Lisa tried to rally, but it was no use. One by one, the homeowners turned on her, their trust in tatters. Finally, a senior member sighed. We got no choice. The HOA's covering the damages. Lisa flinched. But no buts, he snapped. This is our mess. We wrecked his yard, and now our homes are wrecked. We pay up. Lisa's fists clenched. I could see in her eyes she wanted to scream, to fight back, but she was cornered. She'd lost. A week later, I got an official letter from the HOA. Inside were two things: a formal apology admitting their screw-up, and a check for the full cost of restoring my garden. I framed the letter not out of pride, but as a reminder. Bullies like Lisa only get it when they face consequences. I stood in my yard, looking at the freshly planted flowers, the renewed soil, the beauty I'd brought back. My garden was mine again.